For years, gaming laptops have followed a very simple formula. You take the fastest components you can find, cram them into a big, aggressive black box, and hope it doesn't melt a hole through your desk or your pants. But this is a new Area-51 from Alienware. And they haven't just thought about power. They've thought about cooling, and most importantly, ergonomics. I mean, just look at this thing. It's not a slab. It's been sculpted. The chassis has these fluid contours as if it were poured rather than built. And the lid, while being anodized aluminum, has been finished in this really nice dark iridescent coating that also gives it a really nice sheen in brighter environments. But there is a small problem. This thing does attract a lot of fingerprints, so you definitely need a microfiber towel to keep it clean. But then when you open it, the hinge, you can't actually see it because Alienware, they say that it's invisible, though it still exists. It's just that they've redesigned it from the bottom in order to make it sleek and low profile. And it is super smooth. I mean, this thing is so rigid. It's almost as if I'm opening or cutting a slice of butter. Plus, it opens with one hand, and when you close it down, there's a magnetic lip, which again gives you that satisfying sound. Love that detail. They've also been pretty clever with designing the cooling system. So the exhaust vents aren't just holes punched into the sides of the chassis. Instead, they're just beautifully contoured outlets at the sides and at the back. They just look like thrusters from a starship, and it just fits the branding so well. But my favorite part, and the most brilliantly pointless feature, is this right over here. This is the thermal bump. It's a little shelf that's sitting right over here that's covered in Gorilla Glass, and it gives you a peek into the components inside. Is this absolutely necessary? No. It serves no practical purpose whatsoever, and for that reason alone, I love it. And then when you turn it on in the dark, they've actually stepped up the ambient lighting on this laptop. So there's lighting that sort of shows through the fans right over here at the top. You can also take a peek of it through that window at the bottom. And then the touchpad is essentially this illuminated sheet of glass. I also really like what they've done with the ambient lighting on the thermal shelf. It's sort of hidden underneath, but it gives you this gradient aurora looks. It's so unique. I've never seen any laptop try this. It's not too bright, it's not too dim, it's just perfect. But with all that being said, how practical are these laptops? Well, Alienware is offering the Area-51 in two sizes. There's a 16-inch and an 18-inch model, which we also happen to have in the studio. This thing is ginormous. They're also priced pretty competitively, at least relative to what you're getting. So retail, yes, they're astronomically expensive, but let's be honest, no one buys a Dell laptop at full price. With constant sales running throughout the year, the 16-inch model we have over here with the Ultra 275X, 32 gigabytes of RAM and an RTX 5080 comes in just under $3,000, while the 18-inch version, this thing carries a bulkier price tag with an RTX 5090 in our test unit. Build quality on both these laptops, fantastic. There's barely any keyboard flex. Everything feels solid. But if you're looking for a true portable powerhouse, this might not be that, because the 16-inch weighs around 3.4 kilos, which is about 7.5 pounds. The 18-inch is a hefty 4.3 kilos, and it's under 10 pounds. And yeah, it definitely doesn't fit my backpack. They've increased the depth of the chassis to accommodate the thermal shelf, which makes it noticeably chunkier as well in terms of thickness. Both models hover between 28 to 30 millimeters of range, so it's just over an inch. It's manageable, but it's still dense. And the power brick is also super massive. Both of them come with a 360 watt unit, and that uses Dell's proprietary barrel style connector. So yeah, lugging these things around isn't ideal. And the 18-inch version, just forget about portability. Moving on to the interior space, they've carried over some of that modular design language from the previous generations. But keep in mind, even though this is a 16-inch display, the bezels are pretty thick on both of the 16 and 18-inch laptops, so it feels larger than it needs to. The keyboard layout is pretty standard. So on the 16-inch, you get a centralized layout. I love this. There's no numpad, although if you do need that, you got to step it up to the 18-inch model. But you also get dedicated mic mute and volume adjust buttons right over here on the 16-inch version. You also get full-size arrow keys on both these laptops, which is really nice. But what's the deal with the massive Copilot button? I mean, it takes up way too much space, and What I ended up doing is I just remapped it using Microsoft Power Toys to launch the Windows search field. It's super handy and it's much better than the useless Copilot buttons. Now, about the typing experience, I've got some thoughts. Honestly, Alienware dropped the ball here. I wanted to like it, and I really do. It has 1.8 millimeters of key travel, and the keys themselves are stable and well built, but it's the switch mechanism. That's the problem. Every time when I bottom out, or if I'm just casually writing an email, there's this high-pitched pinging noise. It's sharp, it's metallic, and if you have sensitive hearing, it gets annoying very fast. Have a listen. Now, if you're someone who prefers a quieter typing experience, Alienware does offer a second keyboard option. It's also cheaper than the mechanical version that you just listened to, but I'm not sure how it performs, so if you happen to have one of these keyboards, let us know your experience. The trackpad on both these laptops are stellar. It's precision glass surface. You get a slightly larger version on the 18-inch model, but I love the one on the 16-inch because it's not too big, not too small. It's just the right size. Multi-finger gestures work perfectly. I would give these trackpads an A+. And yes, the RGB glow is a vibe. You can turn it on or off depending on your preference, but I just like it on because it complements the rest of the lighting setup. The port setup is actually pretty interesting. So unlike most gaming laptops that scatter the ports across the sides and the back, the Area-51 actually puts everything to the rear. So you get 2 Thunderbolt 5 ports, HDMI 2.1, power in, 3 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A ports, and that's kind of where the confusion starts. I mean, why Gen 1? This thing costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and you give us 5 gigabits per second USB ports? I mean, it just makes no sense, and that's definitely an L for Dell. Now, this layout is great for cable management, especially if you're docking it in, but it's not ideal for quick access. If you need to quickly plug in a flash drive or an external drive, you gotta reach all the way at the back, and it just would have made a lot more sense to include at least a couple of ports on the side. Now, speaking of sides, on both these laptops, you do get a full-size SD card slot and an audio jack. Now, the displays on these laptops, the 16-inch and the 18-inch model feature Quad HD 240Hz panels, and thankfully, I'm so glad that they're not OLED. But they are really well-tuned IPS panels, and honestly, it's really nice. It's a matte finish, so you can finally say goodbye to reflections. The colors are vibrant. They're not quite OLED level punch, but it hits that sweet spot that feels natural and pleasing to the eye. It covers 91% Adobe RGB and 99% of the DCI-P3 color gamut with a Delta E rating of 1.34, so color accuracy is solid out of the box. The peak SDR brightness hits around 570 nits on both laptops, which is seriously bright for an IPS panel. Whether you're gaming or doing anything productive or dabbling into content creation, this display holds its own. And here's a detail that I love. Because these panels are IPS, there's no PWM flicker. It uses DC dimming instead, so even at low brightness levels, it's comfortable on the eyes, it's great for extended use, and I feel like people who are sensitive to that kind of stuff would really appreciate these panels. This is what the webcam looks like on the Area-51 gaming laptop. They are using a 1080p sensor, and it's well detailed. The microphone sounds pretty good as well. Let me know what you guys think. The speakers on both these laptops are decent. I wish there was a little bit more bass. You do get 2 woofers at the bottom and 2 tweeters, but yeah, they're satisfactory. I wouldn't say that they're the best in class out there. Under the hood, you're greeted with what's arguably one of the cleanest and best looking PCB layouts in any gaming laptop right now. The quad fan setup is on full display over here. It's paired with a beefier copper and vapor chamber module compared to the previous generation. Everything is easy to access. The SODIMM slots are located right over here. You get support for up to 64 gigabytes of DDR5 memory. The primary NVMe SSD is located right over here, and the performance is solid for Gen 4 standards. We clocked around 6.5 gigabytes per second on read and 5.7 gigabytes per second on write. Now the 18-inch model steps things up with a Gen 5 SSD, effectively doubling the read and write performance. It's nice to see Alienware offering that flexibility on both these options if you choose to go that route, especially for users who want to spec this thing. Now, storage-wise, you can load it up with up to 12 terabytes thanks to the additional 2 M.2 slots positioned right over here. I mean, talk about ultimate future-proofing. So the design of the new Area-51 is pretty unique. But remember, Dell went back to the drawing board based on our feedback with the previous generation laptops, and they revamped the performance threshold along with better thermals. So did that pay off? Both the 16 and 18-inch model come with 4 built-in power profiles. There's quiet, balanced, performance, and overdrive. And you can cycle between those modes through the F6 key or through the command center. Speaking of the command center, I've got some beef with Dell here, okay? First of all, the layout, it seems a little bit better compared to the previous versions, but I'm still having issues just trying to cycle between the performance modes. On both these laptops, if I want to switch from balance to performance, the thing just hangs up on me. It's absolutely frustrating, and it requires a reboot for it to get sorted. I mean, this is the sort of thing that really puts a dent on your user experience. So please, Dell, fix it. Now, the Ultra 9 275X CPU in both these machines operate anywhere between 80 watts all the way up to 162 watts, depending on the mode you're in. So the 16-inch model does pull slightly less power overall, and that's likely due to the thermal limitations from the smaller chassis. What's impressive though is that clock speeds remain fairly consistent between both models, despite the difference in power draw. We'll be running these machines in performance mode throughout the rest of the tests. Now you can throw as much as power as you want at the CPU, but has Alienware actually cracked the code to keep temperatures and noise under control? Surprisingly, it looks like they have, because these are by far the coolest running gaming laptops we've tested. Whether you're pushing heavy Blender workloads or just casually browsing the web, the thermal system really holds its own. But it doesn't stop there. What really impressed us is the acoustic performance. The noise profile on both the 16 and 18-inch models is honestly mind-blowing compared to the competition. Now, to be clear, 48 decibels isn't quiet, but when you stack it up against other high-performance gaming laptops, it's noticeably refined. Even during lighter tasks, both Area-51 models maintain a relatively quiet and controlled fan profile, making them a lot more usable in everyday scenarios without sounding like a jet engine. When it comes to raw performance, the Ultra 9 275X delivers exactly what you'd expect based on the power it's pulling. I mean, looking at Cinebench R23 and 2024, the multi-core performance is solid, and it does a pretty good job catching up to AMD's reigning champ in the laptop space, the Ryzen 9 9955HX 3D, and even the non-3D variants in MSI's Raider and Vector 18 laptops. That said, single-core performance is where Intel continues to shine. The Ultra 9 holds its ground and actually outperforms AMD in this area, which helps in tasks that are more lightly threaded. When you move away from synthetic benchmarks and into real-world applications, raw numbers don't necessarily paint the entire picture, especially for multi-core workloads. When you take Blender, for example, it tends to favor AMD's Ryzen CPUs, and that's thanks to those extra 8 threads on the 9955HX 3D and the non-3D processors, and that gives AMD the edge in heavily threaded tasks. But even with that thread deficit, the Ultra 9 275X holds its own in both the 16 and 18-inch models. It keeps things surprisingly close, and we see a similar trend carry over into Houdini. The time difference between these systems is barely noticeable, but ultimately, that depends on your workflow. If you're someone who just needs to squeeze out every last second, the Area-51, it still delivers consistent results. Switching over to video transcoding with Handbrake, Intel pulls ahead slightly. The Ultra 9s seem to be better optimized for this task, offering a smaller performance bump over their Ryzen counterparts. But still, we're not talking about day and night differences here. It's just marginal gains. When it comes to creative workloads like Photoshop, the results are actually a bit mixed. You see, Photoshop tends to benefit from faster storage, and even though the 18-inch Alienware comes with a blazing fast Gen 5 SSD, it still couldn't quite match the performance of the MSI Vector or Raider 18 in certain tasks. However, Lightroom tells a different story. It ran exceptionally well on both models, and the 18-inch model was actually the fastest to export our test, finishing all 100 raw photos ahead of the pack. For GPU-heavy applications, both the RTX 5080 and 5090 in these laptops live up to our expectations. In Blender, they perform exactly where they should. Handbrake tells a similar story. The GPUs do their job well. And in NLEs like DaVinci Resolve, I've got to be honest, the 5090's triple encoder engine really flexes its power, significantly cutting down export times. And the 5080's dual encoder layout still performs great. It's not quite on the same level though. I think this is arguably the best feature for creators who use this application. But then when we get to Adobe Premiere Pro, And this is where things got a little weird. Both the 16-inch and 18-inch Area-51s took slightly longer than expected to complete the render task. We ran this test multiple times and couldn't pinpoint exactly what went wrong. So this could be a case of software-specific optimizations, or it could be a driver quirk. But either way, it's something worth noting. Oh, and quick side note, we did run into a BSOD in the middle of testing on the 16-inch model. It's classic. I mean, nothing too out of the ordinary for us at this point. It seems like every 50 series laptop that we've tested has been a little susceptible to this. So it's more of a pattern than an isolated incident. So that's the story with the CPU. What about the GPU? Well, once again, Alienware didn't cut any corners in the power department. Both the 16 and 18-inch Area-51 laptops draw anywhere from 100 to 173 watts based on power modes under load, which is a lot of juice for a laptop. Now keep in mind, when you set these machines to overdrive mode, the fans ramp up hard. We're talking jet engine levels of noise, and that's not something that you want near your ears for longer periods. Ideally, performance mode is a sweet spot. It lowers the power ceiling slightly, but the upside is a much quieter experience and a more enjoyable gaming experience. Just like I mentioned in the CPU section, even for GPU-heavy workloads in gaming, the Area-51 series remains the quietest in its class. The thermals were also surprisingly impressive. The 16-inch model hovered around 74 degrees under load, while the 18-inch model stays even cooler at 61 degrees Celsius. And keep in mind, that's an RTX 5090 pulling 173 watts. That's just bananas. Surface temperatures are actually well managed. The 16-inch model does run a bit warmer than the 18-inch, which makes sense. The larger chassis in the 18-inch allows for a more robust cooling system. What's impressive though is how well designed the thermal layout is. Despite the GPUs drawing massive amounts of power, the palm rest area stays cool to the touch on both models. And that's not something you see often in high-performance gaming laptops. So with all that power being fed into the GPU, how does it perform in games? Well, in short, expect top-tier numbers. The RTX 5090 in the Area-51 18 is one of the fastest laptops we've ever tested. It's just a hair behind the MSI Raider A18, which also features the same GPU, but the Raider's secret weapon is AMD's Ryzen 9 X 3D chip and 3D V-Cache. Honestly, that tech has been a game changer for gaming performance. And it would have been great to see Dell take advantage of it, but unfortunately, due to exclusivity, Intel CPUs are the only option for these guys. Now, there are some titles that do favor Intel's Arrow Lake HX CPUs, which gives the Area-51 a slight edge in certain games. As for the 16-inch model with the RTX 5080, performance is a bit of a mixed bag, but still very respectable. In some titles, it leads the pack, outperforming every other 5080 laptop we've tested. In others, it falls to the bottom of the charts. It's basically a game-by-game scenario, but overall, it holds its own. Switching gears to 4K gaming using an external monitor, both the 16 and 18-inch Area-51 laptops put up a good fight. Some games like CS2, Doom, and Starfield, for example, see slight dip in 1% lows, but across the rest of our tests, the 18-inch Area-51 with the RTX 5090 consistently topped our charts, while the 16-inch model with the RTX 5080 followed a few steps behind. Now, let's bring pricing into this conversation because it plays a crucial role in the bigger picture. Competitors like the ROG Strix Scar 18 and the MSI Raider A18, both with RTX 5090s, typically range between $4,600 to $5,000 US. Meanwhile, the Alienware 18 comes in at $600 to $800 less, and that makes a big difference in terms of value. On the RTX 5080 side, most high-end laptops hover around $3,000, but again, the Alienware 16 undercuts that by a few $100s. And honestly, for that kind of money, you're getting incredible performance for the price. These are easily some of the best value to performance gaming laptops on the market right now, and the best part is, Alienware didn't cut any corners to get there. Remember earlier when I mentioned how AMD's X3D chips are the best thing that has happened to gaming and how awesome it would have been if Alienware had used those chips? Well, I'm kind of glad that they didn't, because the battery life gains with the Intel Arrow Lake HX CPUs are pretty huge. So both the 16 and 18-inch Area-51 laptops come with a generous 95-watt battery. And surprisingly, the 16-inch model delivers the best battery life across our tests, from light web browsing to 4K YouTube playback and even some heavy gaming. though it only lasted for a couple of hours. The 18-inch model lags behind a bit, but that's expected because it's driving a much larger screen and the CPU consumes a bit more power, resulting in slightly higher clock speeds. But how do they perform on battery? Not too bad, actually. These new Arrow Lake HX chips managed to retain a decent level of performance, especially when compared to the Ryzen 9955 HX3D and non-3D laptops. That said, you're still looking at about a 40% performance drop when unplugged, which is significant, but again, not unexpected. Here's a quick comparison in Handbrake plugged in versus on battery. The RG Scar 16 and 18 still come out on top in battery performance, but I think Alienware, they put up a good fight here as well. So that's the new Alienware Area-51 laptops. I think these are arguably the best gaming laptops that Dell has come out with. The styling is super unique. They tried something different with the ambient lighting and it works pretty well. Build quality is superb. I just really wish that the keyboard didn't sound too sharp. It pumps a ton of power to the CPU and GPU, and the thermals and noise levels are awesome. It can easily handle it, and I was surprised by the battery life on the 16-inch Area-51. They're not the most portable, but they're also not perfect. But I have to say, for the price, these are some of the best value we've seen in the ultra premium gaming space. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to spend responsibly.